"We didn't order for you," Dad said, handing me bread while my sister enjoyed her $400 steak. Her husband sneered, "Be grateful you're invited." When the bill came, Dad said, "Let's split it fairly." I replied, "Sure." The restaurant was one of those places where the hostess sized you up before checking the reservation list. Everything gleamed under soft amber lighting, from the crystal chandeliers to the polished marble floors. I stood near the entrance in my best dress, the navy one I'd bought on sale 3 years ago, watching my sister Victoria glide past in something that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Emily," Mum called out, waving from a corner booth. We'd been waiting. I hadn't been late. The reservation was for 7, and my phone showed 6:58, but punctuality had never mattered when it came to me. What mattered was that Victoria had arrived first, and therefore I was the one who'd kept everyone waiting. Dad didn't look up from his menu as I slid into the booth. Victoria sat across from me, her husband Marcus beside her, his arm draped possessively across the back of her chair. He wore a watch that caught the light with every movement, demanding attention the way expensive things do. "You look nice," Victoria said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Is that the dress for Aunt Linda's funeral?" "Different dress," I replied, knowing it wasn't. The waiter appeared, introducing himself as James and reciting specials that didn't have prices attached because, if you had to ask, you probably shouldn't be there. Victoria ordered the Wagyu steak with truffle butter. Marcus got the lobster tail with some kind of caviar I couldn't pronounce. Mom chose lamb chops that came with seasonal accompaniments, whatever that meant. Dad ordered the surf and turf, then closed his menu with finality. I was still reading mine, trying to find something under $50, when James turned to me with his practiced smile. "And for you, Miss..." Before I could answer, Dad's hand covered the menu, pushing it down to the table. "She have the bread basket," he said, "and water." The silence that followed felt thick enough to cut. James's smile faltered for just a moment before professional training kicked back in. "Of course, sir. Will there be anything else?" I found my voice somewhere beneath the humiliation burning in my chest. "Actually, I'd like the bread." "Will be fine," Dad interrupted. "She's watching her figure anyway, aren't you, Emily?" I wasn't watching anything except the way Marcus smirked into his wine glass, already poured from a bottle that probably costs more than my car payment. Victoria studied her manicure. Each nail a perfect almond shake painted in what she'd probably call ballet slipper pink instead of just pale. Mom reached over and patted my hand. "The bread here is supposed to be wonderful. Imported flour or something. From France," Victoria added helpfully. "I read about it in their press release." James backed away from our table like he was retreating from a crime scene. I sat there, 29 years old, with a master's degree and a full-time job as a marketing coordinator, about to eat complimentary bread for dinner while my family feasted on food that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. This wasn't new. The golden child treatment had started when Victoria was born 3 years after me, arriving with a full head of blonde hair and none of the colic that had apparently made me such a difficult baby. She'd been everything I wasn't: outgoing where I was shy, naturally thin where I had to work at it, interested in the things Dad cared about like golf and stock portfolios instead of books and independent films. When she'd married Marcus 2 years ago, my exclusion from family dynamics had become even more pronounced. Marcus came from money, the kind that had been in his family for generations. He worked in private equity, which seemed to mean he made money by moving other people's money around. Dad worshipped him. The bread arrived in a wooden bowl lined with cloth, 3 pieces. I took one and broke it slowly, making it last while watching my sister cut into a steak. The meat was so rare that pink juice pooled on her plate. "How's work, Emily?" Mum asked, the way someone might inquire about a distant relative's health. Polite but not particularly interested in the answer. "Good. We landed the Harrison account last week." "That's nice, honey." Dad was already talking over me about Marcus's latest business venture, something involving cryptocurrency and overseas investors. Marcus leaned forward, animated in a way he never was when I spoke, explaining blockchain technology like he was teaching children about addition. I ate my bread. It was good bread, crusty on the outside and soft inside, probably baked that afternoon. I tried to appreciate it, to find some dignity in thoroughly enjoying my complimentary dinner roll while pretending the butter I spread on it was enough to make a meal. Victoria cut another piece of steak, this one practically purple in the center. "This is incredible," she moaned. "Marcus, you have to try it." She fed him a bite across the table, and he made a show of closing his eyes in appreciation. "Outstanding, though not as good as the one we had in Tokyo last month." "Oh, that place was unreal," Victoria agreed. "Remember the chef came out and carved it right at our table." They launched into a detailed discussion of their Japanese vacation, the one they'd taken for Victoria's 30th birthday. I'd spent my 30th birthday having drinks with 2 friends from work at a bar with happy hour specials. My second piece of bread disappeared faster than the first. I was actually hungry, having skipped lunch to save money after my car needed an unexpected repair. The remaining piece sat in the basket, mocking me with its inadequacy. "You know, Emily," Marcus said suddenly, turning his attention to me for the first time all evening, "you should really be grateful you're even invited to these things." I looked up from my water glass. "Excuse me, I'm just saying. He gestured vaguely at the restaurant around us. This isn't exactly your scene. Your dad was telling me you drive a 2008 Honda with a dent in the passenger door. That must have been hard to park next to the Mercedes and Range Rovers out front. Victoria giggled, actually giggled, like we were in middle school and he just made a joke about my outfit. Mom looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Dad nodded along as if Marcus had made an excellent point. My car runs fine, I managed to say. I'm sure it does. Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. That's not the point. The point is that places like this, experiences like this, they're not really for people in your situation. So when you're invited along, the appropriate response is gratitude, not sitting there with that look on your face. What looked like someone owes you something. The third piece of bread turned to ash in my mouth. I wanted to leave, to stand up and walk out, but my car was parked behind theirs and we'd all come separately. I'd driven 40 minutes to get here, to a restaurant in a part of the city I couldn't afford because family dinner was supposed to be important. Dinner continued around me. They discussed Victoria's upcoming trip to the Maldives. The new Tesla Marcus was considering whether they should renovate their guest bathroom or just redo the whole second floor. I learned that my sister's steak cost $420, Marcus's lobster was $370, the wine they'd ordered was $600 for the bottle, and they were already on their second class each. I did the math in my head. My bread cost nothing. My water was free. I could split the bill evenly and owe over $400, or I could make a scene by asking to pay separately and face the humiliation of explaining that I couldn't afford to subsidize their luxury meal. James appeared with desert menus, leather-bound folders that probably cost more than my shoes. Victoria and Marcus debated between the chocolate souffle and the creme brulee trio before deciding to get both and share. Mom ordered tiramisu. Dad got the cheese plate. Nothing for me, I said when James looked my way. Are you sure? Victoria asked with fake concern. They have sorbet, that's basically ice with fruit flavor. Very low calorie. Marcus laughed loud enough that people at neighboring tables glanced over. I fixed my eyes on the candle in the center of our table and waited for this evening to end. The desserts arrived on plates that looked like art installations. Victoria and Marcus fed each other spoonfuls of souffle, making sounds that seemed designed to remind me what I was missing. Dad meticulously explained the difference between aged cheddar and aged Gouda to no one in particular. Mom picked at her tiramisu, and I wondered if she felt guilty or if this was just another Tuesday to her. Finally, after what felt like hours, James brought the check. He placed it in the center of the table, a small black folder that somehow contained the financial summary of my entire evening of humiliation. Dad reached for it, pulled out his reading glasses, and studied the total. His eyebrows rose slightly. Well, he said, this is more than I expected. Marcus leaned over to look. 2,400 even. That's not bad for 5 people at a place like this. 4 people 8, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. What was that? Dad asked. I spoke louder. 4 people 8. I ate bread. Don't be dramatic, Emily, Victoria said. You were here. You participated. In what? Watching you eat a $400 steak. The table went quiet. A different kind of quiet than before, charged with something sharp. That's enough, Dad said, his voice carrying the warning tone I'd heard my whole life. Let's not make a scene. He pulled out his credit card, then paused. I watched the thought form in his head, saw the exact moment he decided to teach me another lesson about my place in this family. Actually, he said, putting the card back in his wallet, let's split this fairly. 5 ways. That's, he calculated quickly, $480 each. My stomach dropped. $480, that was my electricity, internet, and phone bills combined. That was groceries for 3 weeks. That was the car repair fund I'd been building for the past 2 months. Marcus pulled out his credit card immediately. Sounds fair to me. Victoria nodded, reaching for her purse. Totally fair. Mom looked like she might object, but Dad's expression stopped her. She retrieved her wallet. They all looked at me, expectant. This was it. This was the moment they wanted. They wanted me to fumble and apologize and explain that I couldn't afford it. Wanted me to feel the weight of the difference between us. Wanted to see me reduced to begging for mercy or financial assistance. Something crystallized inside me then, cold and clear. Sure, I said. I'll pay for exactly what I consumed. I pulled out my phone, opened the calculator app where everyone could see it, and started typing. Bread basket. Complimentary water. Complimentary. My total, $0. That's not how this works, Dad said, his face reddening. You said split it fairly. I'm being perfectly fair. I'm paying for what I ate, which is nothing that appears on this bill. You were at the table, Marcus interjected. You benefited from the ambience, the service. Did I cut him off? Because I'm pretty sure I was told not to order anything. You want to talk about fair? Let's actually be fair. I pulled out my wallet and placed $2 on the table. That's for James. A tip on the meal I didn't have. Now let's do the math on what everyone else owes. I picked up the bill and read it out loud. Victoria Wagyu steak, $420. Creme brulee trio, 18. 2 glasses of the Chateau Margaux, $120. Marcus lobster tail, $370 chocolate soup. 16 2 glasses of wine, $120. Mom lamb chops, $85. Tiramisu, $14. Dad, surf and turf, $165. Cheese plate, $28. I looked up. Should I continue with the appetizers you all shared while I sat here? The oysters were $65. I didn't have any, but you all did. We could divide that 4 ways if you want to be fair. Emily, stop this right now, Dad ordered. I'm doing exactly what you asked. Splitting things fairly. I stood up, leaving my $2 on the table. Here's fair. You invited me to a restaurant I couldn't afford, then refused to let me order anything. Then tried to stick me with a $500 bill for the privilege of watching you eat. That's not fair, that's cruel. How dare you, Victoria? It started, but I wasn't finished. You want to know what's not fair? Fair isn't being treated like a burden my entire life because I didn't marry rich. Fair isn't being excluded from family trips and then mocked for not having traveled. Fair isn't listening to Marcus tell me I should be grateful to be invited to my own father's dinner while eating bread and water like some kind of Victorian orphan. My voice had risen. People were definitely staring now. James hovered nearby, clearly unsure whether to intervene. This whole evening was designed to remind me that I don't belong. I continued. The fancy restaurant I couldn't afford, the food I wasn't allowed to order, the conversation about vacations and cars and renovations that I could never have. And then, just to really drive it home, you tried to make me pay $500 for the experience of being humiliated. Mum was crying softly. Victoria looked furious. Marcus had his phone out, probably texting someone about the crazy Dad's face had gone from red to almost purple. If you walk out of here without paying, he said slowly, you are no longer part of this family. The threat hung in the air between us. I thought about all the family dinners I'd attended over the years, sitting at the kids' table long after I'd become an adult because Victoria needed the extra space. Christmas mornings where Victoria got a new car and I got a gift card to Target. My college graduation where Dad had spent the entire dinner talking about Victoria's latest promotion at her marketing firm, the one her father-in-law owned. I thought about the wedding I hadn't been invited to be in because the dresses were too expensive and they didn't want me to feel bad. The baby shower for the nephew I'd barely been allowed to meet because Victoria said I made her uncomfortable with my energy. The birthday parties I'd heard about through social media posts. You know what, Dad? I picked up my purse. You can't kick me out of something I was never really part of. I turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing needed saying. For the record, I make $63,000 a year. I have a 401k, health insurance, and an emergency fund. I budget carefully and I live within my means. I'm not poor, I'm just not rich. But you've treated me like a charity case my entire adult life because I didn't marry money. Because I chose a career I loved instead of one that paid 6 figures. Because I valued things like books and experiences over designer purses and luxury cars. I looked at each of them in turn. You didn't order for me because you wanted to save money. You did it because you wanted to remind me of my place. You wanted me to sit here and be grateful for scraps while you gorged yourselves. And then you wanted me to pay for the privilege. Well, here's what I learned tonight. My place isn't here. It's somewhere else. Somewhere I don't have to earn basic respect through my bank account balance. I walked toward the exit, my hands shaking but my steps steady. Emily, Mom called after me, but she didn't stand up. She never stood up. James intercepted me near the coat check, his professional mask slipping just enough for me to see genuine concern underneath. Miss, I just wanted to say. He glanced back toward my table, then leaned in slightly. I've worked here for 6 years. What they did to you tonight was wrong. I've seen a lot of things, but that was particularly cruel. His words almost broke me. The kindness from a stranger when my own family had shown none. I managed a small smile. Thank you, James. That means more than you know. For what it's worth, he added, pressing something into my hand, you handled yourself with more grace than they deserved. I looked down. It was my $2, the tip I'd left. Keep it, he said. You earned your dignity tonight. That's worth more than any tip. I tried to give it back, but he'd already turned away, heading back toward the dining room where my family was presumably scrambling to figure out how to pay their massive bill without my contribution. Outside, the night air was cool and clean for the restaurant's stifling atmosphere. The valet parking attendant looked at me with curiosity, probably wondering why I was leaving separately from my party. Can I help you, miss? No, I'm sorry. Thank you though. I walked through the lot, past the Mercedes and BMWs and one particularly obnoxious Maserati that had to be Marcus's. My Honda sat in the back corner, humble and reliable, exactly where I'd left it. The dent in the passenger door caught the parking lot lights, a reminder of the minor fender bender I had last year that insurance barely covered. I made it to my car, got inside, and locked the doors. Then I sat there, breathing, letting the adrenaline work its way through my system. My hands were still shaking. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, and let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. What had I just done? I'd essentially cut ties with my entire family in the middle of a crowded restaurant. I'd made a scene, the exact thing I'd been trained my whole life never to do. And somehow, underneath the shock and fear, I felt exhilarated. I started the car, listening to the familiar rumble of the engine. The check engine light that had been on for 2 months glowed softly on the dashboard, another expense I'd been putting off. My gas tank was at a quarter full. I had $17 in my checking account until payday on Friday, 3 days away. These were my realities, not $400 steaks or $600 wine bottles or trips to the Maldives. My life was budgeting and coupons and choosing between getting my oil changed or buying new work clothes. But it was my life. Mine, built by my own effort and choices, not handed to me through marriage or family connections. I pulled out of the parking spot and headed toward the exit. As I waited to turn onto the main road, I saw Victoria and Marcus emerge from the restaurant. Even from a distance, I could read Victoria's body language, the angry gestures, the way she threw her hands up in exasperation. Marcus had his phone pressed to his ear, probably calling someone to complain about his psychotic sister. I turned right and drove away, and with each mile between me and that restaurant, the weight on my chest grew lighter. The drive home took 45 minutes, long enough for my mind to replay the entire evening on loop. Every word, every look, every calculated humiliation. I thought about earlier moments too, memories I'd buried or rationalized away over the years. My 16th birthday, when I'd asked for a small party and been told the budget didn't allow it, only to watch Victoria get a catered sweet 16 6 months later with a DJ and ice sculpture. My high school graduation, attended only by Mom because Dad and Victoria were at some golf tournament. My college acceptance to a good state school, met with "that's nice," while Victoria's acceptance to the same school 2 years later had warranted a celebratory dinner. The patterns had always been there. I'd just gotten very good at not seeing them, at making excuses, at telling myself I was being sensitive or reading too much into things. A car honked behind me. The light had turned green. I accelerated, refocusing on the road. My apartment complex appeared on the left, a modest 2-story building with beige siding and functional landscaping. Nothing like Victoria's gated community with its fountains and golf course views, but it was clean and safe and mine. I parked in my assigned spot, number 247, and climbed the external stairs to my second-floor unit. Inside, the space was small but carefully arranged. I'd furnished it slowly over the years, mixing thrift store finds with a few new pieces I'd saved up for. The couch was from IKEA. The coffee table had been my grandmother's. The bookshelf I'd built myself from a YouTube tutorial. I dropped my purse on the counter and collapsed onto the couch, finally allowing myself to feel the full impact of the evening. My phone buzzed. Then again, and again. I pulled it out, already knowing what I'd find. 7 missed calls from Dad, 3 from Victoria, 2 from Mom, multiple texts, each notification making my phone vibrate with increasing urgency. I opened the messages. "Dad, get back here right now. You will apologize and pay your share or consider yourself disowned. Victoria, I can't believe you embarrassed us like that. Marcus is so upset." Everyone was staring. Victoria again. "You've always been jealous of me. This just proves it." Mom, "Sweetie, please come back. We can talk this out. Your father is very angry, but I'm sure we can smooth this over." Marcus had somehow gotten my number. "Your behavior tonight was classless and pathetic. Victoria deserves better than a sister like you." I read through them all, watching the tone shift from angry to incredulous to threatening. In Dad's final message, sent just 2 minutes ago, he'd written, "Fine. If this is how you want it, don't expect any help from us ever again. You're on your own." I typed out a response. "I've always been on my own. Tonight just made it official." Then I deleted it without sending. They didn't deserve a response. Engaging would only give them ammunition, something to screenshot and show to relatives as proof of my instability or disrespect. Instead, I opened my phone's settings and blocked all 3 numbers. Mom, Dad, Victoria. The blocks felt permanent, like closing doors that couldn't be reopened. My apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I turned on the TV for background noise. Some home renovation show where people with unlimited budgets debated between marble and quartz countertops. I wasn't really watching. My mind kept circling back to the restaurant, to the look on Dad's face when I'd stood up, to Victoria's shocked expression. Had I overreacted? The doubt crept in, insidious and familiar. Maybe I should have just paid the money. Maybe I should have kept my mouth shut and swallowed the humiliation like I'd done dozens of times before. Maybe family was supposed to be preserved at any cost, even your dignity. But then I remembered Marcus's sneer. "Be grateful you're invited," like I was some kind of charity case instead of a daughter and sister.